The Iowa caucuses are almost here. On Monday, Iowans will kick off the nation's first voting contest. The results can set the tone for the rest of the 2020 race. But tradition was upended Saturday when the Des Moines Register, CNN, and its polling partner announced the, quote, heart-wrenching decision not to release the final installment of its presidential preference poll. It comes after concerns the results may have been compromised. The Register has published the Iowa poll for more than 70 years, and it is considered to be the gold standard of political polling. But our latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows a tight race. CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns has been following it, and she joins me from Des Moines. Caitlin, why did the Register decide to pull the plug on releasing this poll, which all the campaigns look for? And can you explain how much this really matters to voters in Iowa?
Hi, Omar. Well, we're just a few really hours away from caucus day tomorrow, so we're having a little bit of a shuffling here. This is a poll that, as you mentioned, has been kind of the gold standard of polls, has set the tone going into caucus day, and has been really accurate over the past several election cycles. The campaign of Pete Buttigieg, however, raised a complaint to the poll when they said that a person surveying folks left Pete Buttigieg off of one of the samples. And so that had caused the pollsters to really have to reevaluate the legitimacy of this poll. And it could have a couple of different impacts or effects. One, we've been talking to lots of voters on the ground here at various campaign events, and a lot of them are undecided. So that kind of poll may have been influential in helping them make up their minds. But now, without that poll, this could allow some of these campaigns to really see what their ground games are all about. This could actually benefit some campaigns where voters are not necessarily looking at the polls, but going into caucus night and hearing the arguments from the campaigns if they're undecided and potentially being swayed over. So this certainly introduces some uncertainty into this race, but also possibly some opportunity for candidates. Now, we're very lucky at CBS that we have an excellent polling unit, and they have still been talking to voters over the weekend. And as you mentioned, they have a survey out looking at our Battleground Tracker poll, who's poised to get delegates. It shows a very fluid race. Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden really at the top there. But here in Iowa, as you know, it's all about the organization. It's all about the ground game. It's not like a primary where you're going off and you're checking a name on the list. You're going into a church basement or an auditorium or a gymnasium, and you're forming groups. So you have candidates, voters going to one side of the room for a candidate, the other side of the room. There's a lot of jockeying going on, a lot of persuasion going on. So this is why the Iowa caucus is always such a fun thing to cover. There's always some uncertainty, and this time even more so.
You mentioned the CBS News poll. Let's talk about that. What's so interesting about the results that we're seeing? We don't have another poll to compare it to, but what's interesting about our poll?
Well, it does show that this is a pretty fluid race with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden really poised to get the most delegates here. That's what this contest is all about. It's a race to get delegates. But what's really important about Iowa is that it traditionally sets the tone for the rest of the race. We've seen a lot of complaints about, especially from Democrats, that Iowa is not a diverse state, that it is not reflective of the Democratic Party at large. But when you're looking at it in the traditional sense, it does tend to set the tone, give whoever emerges here as a victor some momentum, real momentum heading into the next round of contests. But since this race is so open and we could see a lot of these candidates kind of clustered around the top, anybody could kind of create a winning narrative coming out of here. And another item that really changes the dynamic this time around is that we have the impeachment proceedings still hovering over everything. So you could have a scenario in which the winner of the Iowa caucus has to go back to Washington instead of on to New Hampshire, potentially stunting any momentum. So we'll see what happens with that as well.
Let's shift from caucuses to debates. The Democratic National Committee is making big changes to the criteria required to participate in presidential primary debates. Caitlin, how could this impact the lineup that we'll see on stage in Las Vegas on February 19th?
Right. The DNC is eliminating the donor threshold. Remember, a lot of these candidates had to get a certain number of grassroots donors to be able to participate in that debate, in addition to achieving a certain number in polling. And because of those parameters for past debates, that's meant that Michael Bloomberg, who isn't accepting donations, he's self-funding his entire campaign, hasn't been participating in the debate. So this could open up the stage for Michael Bloomberg, who has been running a very unconventional campaign. He's not competing in Iowa. He's not competing in New Hampshire. Instead, he's relying on those Super Tuesday states, those delegate-rich states, California, Texas, and others, to really make his case. And Omar, as you've been watching TV, as I've been watching TV, in these early states and around the country, you've seen a lot of ads by Michael Bloomberg. And he's also getting the attention of the president, who has been tweeting a lot about him just today.
The closing arguments in President Trump's impeachment trial will obviously take place on Monday. That means the presidential candidates who are also senators will be stuck in Washington during the actual Iowa caucuses. So how are those candidates going to try to handle this?
You know, impeachment has really changed a lot of dynamics here. It's been interesting to be on the ground here just days before the Iowa caucuses, and the Iowa caucuses haven't been the main story. Impeachment in Washington has kept a lot of these top contenders on the sidelines in Washington, and it's really changed how they're strategizing around this race. So a couple of things I'm watching for. First, Amy Klobuchar had some momentum in Iowa, needs to do well here in Iowa because she's been making a Midwest pitch. She had been having to spend all her time in Washington. Does that blunt any momentum that she saw? Yesterday, we were with Elizabeth Warren campaigning in the eastern part of the state. She had arrived just the night before, fresh off that impeachment hearing, trying to make up a lot of ground here in Iowa, even changing a key part of her campaign pitch, which is to stay for selfies after each event. You know that she stays for hours after each event to take pictures with everybody. She had to stop that and go to the next event, actually having her dog sub in for her on the selfie line. Bernie Sanders really hit the ground running here as well. Lots of events. He'll be in Des Moines later for canvassing and kickoff. So you're seeing not only these candidates try to make up all the ground that they think that they lost over the week by not being here, but also having lots of people on the ground, knocking on doors, making phone calls, and talking to voters here. They've definitely heard from a lot of the candidates, but a lot of them are still making up their minds. So this last-ditch effort could really have an impact.
Surrogates are also a big deal on campaigns. There's a clip of a leading surrogate for Senator Bernie Sanders, and it's getting some attention on social media. It features Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib in an event in Iowa on Friday. Let's take a listen.
Iowa, we have 3 days. I don't remember if you guys remember last week when someone by the name of Hillary Clinton said that we're not going to boo, we're classy here. We're classy.
I'll boo. Boo. You all know I can't be quiet. No, we're going to boo. That's all right. The haters will shut up on Monday when we win.
There we go.
That is raising some eyebrows, and Senator Clinton also has not been quiet. What's the story behind this?
Right. The 2016 campaign really never ends, does it? This is a reemerging story that we've seen Hillary Clinton make public comments about Bernie Sanders and that 2016 race. We've seen some division in this party kind of continue, and this question, because voters are placing such a premium on defeating Donald Trump, there is this question about how this party can unite around a candidate. And there's been particular focus placed on Bernie Sanders as he's been rising, as he's been doing well, not only here in Iowa, but across the battleground states. If he is the nominee, there has been some concern raised among establishment Democrats about his ability to defeat Donald Trump. Now, that is a dynamic that is really fueling Bernie Sanders supporters, and you heard that from the Congresswoman. What I've been hearing from voters as we've been at these events, as we've been talking to them on the ground, Democratic Party unity is really important to them. We're hearing candidates being asked by voters about how they would unite the party after this nominating process is over. This is a top concern because they have, remember 2016. It's very much still on their minds, as it is for some of these candidates as well. We heard Pete Buttigieg yesterday actually saying that we need to leave the politics of the past in the past. So this is a dynamic that certainly figures to play on, but voters here want the party to get behind one another.
And former Maryland Congressman John Delaney announced Friday he was ending his presidential campaign. We're just a few days from the Iowa caucuses. Why did he do that?
Well, John Delaney was actually the first person to get into this race almost 2 years ago and really had been camped out in Iowa, but he really wasn't doing well. He only made one of the debates early on, wasn't getting that much support here. So it's not really a surprise that he dropped out when he did. A lot of Democrats could have argued that he should have dropped out earlier. But what this does raise is the question of whether Iowa will, in fact, winnow the field even further. So we're watching candidates like Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang and others, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden. How Iowa shapes their trajectory is something that we're watching for on Monday night, and we figure to see this race narrow even further as we get on to New Hampshire.
Caitlin Huey-Burns in chilly Des Moines, thank you.